Welcome to Fading Memories, a supportive podcast for those of us caring for a loved one with memory loss. Hello, you must be Ben.
I am.
I'm Jennifer.
Nice to meet you, Jennifer.
Okay. My name is Jennifer, and I started the podcast Fading Memories, well, technically more than a year ago. My first anniversary is coming up, and it's a Alzheimer's Caregivers support podcast because we all need as much support as we can get if we're caring for a loved one with memory loss. And I found that there weren't a lot of podcasts out there that did that. Actually, there was only one. So I jumped in the fray and started my own.
Awesome.
That's absolutely a critical, important piece. So the reason I know that is because I teach. My name is Ben Brooks. Just for your introductions, we do a podcast on dogs in the news. Michelle and I do. And then I'm also a biochemistry professor. And so I teach large classes of biochemistry people. And this is Alzheimer's is a very, very common topic for us in class. And I commonly ask the students, how does Alzheimer's impact them? And it is probably, along with cancer and heart disease and diabetes, it is right up there on the top. I probably should put together a list, but Alzheimer's care impacts, and we do a little project, and Alzheimer's is almost always a top topic amongst students. And, this is our young people, so it's going all the way down and impacting.
Yeah, I recently did an interview with millennial caregivers, which my daughter's 27, so she's, I guess, on the younger end of the millennial generation. And just talking to the other gal who was slightly older, I think she was like 31 or 32, it just broke my heart. And she's caring for her grandmother. Grandmother's still living independently, but it's like I ended up having to help. My dad passed away out right after my 50th birthday. Oh. And so obviously my sister and I then became fully responsible for our mom. And that was when I realized that she was a lot worse off than I was aware of. And I knew she was bad. So that was kind of not a fun revelation. And I wasn't ready at 50 to give up working. And, the bank would prefer I keep working to pay the mortgage and all those details. And, my daughter had just moved out a month before my dad died. I was like, I'm not ready to be a caregiver to somebody 24/7 for the next 10 or 15 years, about 10 or 15 years. She's only 76 and she's physically very healthy. So she could live quite a long time. And I thought, if I was 70, it might be a different story, but not at 50.
Absolutely.
But you don't have to put together your own list of where Alzheimer's impacts people. Go to the Alzheimer's Association's website. It's alz.org. And they have like an infographic. Alzheimer's is the 5th leading cause of death nationwide. And here in California, it is the 3rd leading cause of death. Yay for being the most populous state in the union.
Michelle, you should jump in right now and introduce yourself.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Michelle Whalen, and I've been working with Ben for, how long, Ben? Like 3 years now?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
I don't know how I would survive without you, so.
Well, thanks. I'm a dog owner and lover. And regarding Alzheimer's, I'm actually, we call him my adopted grandfather, and he has early onset Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing you, Jennifer. I understand how difficult and frustrating it is and how lost you feel without any kind of support.
Yeah, fortunately, I went to, if you've ever experienced hospice, I went to one of their support groups, their grief support group after my dad passed away. And it was like, this is good for that part of my life, but the bigger part is the daily grief of, my mom is not my mom anymore. She has no idea who I am. She has no idea my dad died. And that's way harder to deal with. It's like, I can accept that he's gone. There's occasional times when, I get a little not depressed about, a little sad about it, things that he's missing. Like my daughter, who is not a social person, just started actually planning her wedding. It's like, oh my God, I didn't think that was ever going to happen. And, but then I also think, I just told my husband, I'm like, we're going to have to wait and see if we bring my mom, because my mom has no clue who her oldest grandchild is. And they were super close. So that kind of daily sadness led me to Google Alzheimer's support groups, and that's how I found the one through the Alzheimer's Association, and that's been fantastic. I've been in that one for a little over a year, almost a year and a half. And then I get to talk to all kinds of fantastic people through the podcast, and I've learned so much. It's like if the people who listen to my podcast have learned and gotten as much help as I have, and I've been on this journey a long time with my mom, then I'm doing something right. So hopefully they're learning along the way too.
Well, so we would like to the reason we're kind of doing this is for two reasons. First off, we think that there's really good opportunities for us to discuss how dogs can help in Alzheimer's care in a couple different capacities. And if you want to discuss Alzheimer's at a biochemistry level, like I'll geek out on you.
Well, I tell a lot of my guests that if I was like half my age and had twice as much sense for science, I'm an artist, obviously I'm a photographer, and now I do podcasting, that's an art form too. I like science, but I don't understand a lot of it. If that was different, I would totally go into brain research because I just find it so fascinating. But
yeah, it's not something I regularly do. So I got my PhD in prions, and if you're familiar with prion diseases, I suspect that a large number of the Alzheimer's cases are actually prion diseases, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is another protein misfolding disease. And so the prion protein will also forms plaques and aggregates and does very similar things. So, and a lot of times if you don't do an autopsy, you're not going to notice the difference between the two. The pathologies are very, very similar. And so anyway, and the proteins are very similar in that the structures are very similar. They form when they become misfolded. They're a normal protein. They're associated with memory. And so anyway, that's what I did my PhD in. And so I teach biochemistry. And so when we talk about Alzheimer's is a classic biochemistry story. There is so much fundamental biochemistry in it, and there's still so much we don't know. So much.
Oh, that's true. Well, you and I will have to do an episode on that. But you're going to
absolutely
way dumb it down for some of us, though, because you're like almost losing me a little bit there already.
And that's fine. I have a tendency to do that, but I do. The cool part is we are making progress, and in the area. In fact, a lot of people think that the Alzheimer's proteins are actually, and this is why I don't know if you saw the article about gingivitis.
Yes.
That came out recently. So there's a lot of good evidence to suggest that both the amyloid beta, I call it A beta. So the A beta and the prion protein are both antimicrobial peptides, meaning that they're used to fight off disease in the brain. And that's why gingivitis, and you might have heard the story a while back, they just came out and said herpes was associated with Alzheimer's. And those are all microbes that infect the brain. And I suspect what happens, this is my hypothesis, and it's just a hypothesis, so don't, when I talk about this in class a lot. But what ends up happening is, those proteins are really important to memory, and they're also really important to fighting off diseases. And as you get older, they kind of mess up, right? They're kind of like, they get cleaned up a lot by your brain, right? By sleeping, your body comes in, does some housekeeping, cleans them up. But as you get older, you become less efficient at that. And so that's probably some of the reason why we're starting to see some of these things that are associated with it, like gingivitis and herpes and some of these other viruses and bacteria. That's why we're starting to see this. But that's, anyway, so that's probably why we're starting to see these things associated with Alzheimer's. So anyway,
yeah,
I went off on a tangent already.
Yes, well, that happens.
Take me 2 minutes.
That happens with all of my episodes. I even had one, I don't generally work from notes, but the last one I worked from notes, and it still was like this long conversation, and I'm like, I hope people like the conversational format of the podcast, because I don't seem to be able to get away from that. But
Well,
I have,
that's what I think our people, our viewers like to listen, is just listen to people who are very knowledgeable about the subject matter and talk about it, because I think that's where we're going to start to see really big areas of improvement in some of these things. So,
well, I've always said that one of the biggest issues is the stigma. Like, my mom knew she had a problem, and people that have listened to past episodes know we had a business together. She wasn't writing down instructions when the client expected to pick up the order, minor things like that. And I started basically hovering and supervising. And there was an episode where she didn't recognize her own handwriting, and it was definitely an oh crap moment. And she was like, I don't want to end up like my mother, because my maternal grandmother and my maternal great grandmother had no memories at the end of their life. So yay for me, 3 generations, and I have to be the one that stops it. So she had all this denial, and she didn't do any of the things that we've now learned you could do. Like, I exercise regularly. I do not eat fast food or processed food, or my worst thing is I am a sugar fiend, but I've learned how to reduce that in my eating, and I can't really get rid of the artificial sweeteners. Just can't.
So inflammation would be, that's one of the things that I think that we don't quite understand. The sugar is really bad for you because it really exacerbates the inflammation that you're going to see. So keeping your sugar intake low is really super important. And having good mouth health, obviously, with that new gingivitis thing, is really important. And so the other things that decrease inflammation are your omega-3 fatty acids. And so when we talk about when they that's like your Western diet, your beef, right?
Yep.
Like, I always tell my students, hey, I love me a really good corn-fed beef steak. There's nothing better. But you know what? That omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, which is really important in inflammation, decreasing. Not only is it bad for your glucose, your carbohydrates, and your fat and all that good stuff. It's just really bad for inflammation. You need to be eating fish. You need to be eating, taking your omega-3 supplements, because those decrease the inflammation. That decreases, all the diseases, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, MS, all those things help out. So,
well, I take the supplements, but I don't like any fish. None of it. No tuna fish sandwich, nothing. I don't like the smell.
Grass-fed beef. So,
well, we do get that occasionally. We get the meal delivery from Blue Apron, so their meat is hormone free, which is great for somebody like myself at 52. As soon as we started eating the hormone free meat more regularly, because we only get 3 meals from them a week, I noticed other changes in me that were positive for somebody who's 52. Actually started last year, so we all know what comes with that age for ladies. So, and like I said, I exercise 6 days a week. Once we stop having wet, we're having an atmospheric river. So I'll go back to walking my 3 dogs. I have 3 golden retrievers.
Oh,
I've had
cool.
dogs all my life. So I was very excited to talk to you guys about our topic, which was canine caregivers. Although what we're talking about now before is super interesting.
Well, this is the background, right? I think it's really important that Michelle needs to jump in and help me out, keep me on track. That's her main focus. So we have people on regularly that talk about service dogs, and we would really like to raise awareness about how Alzheimer's patients could be helped with service dogs. Service dogs can do all kinds of just daily tasks, and they can also just facilitate. They can be trained to keep the Alzheimer's patients safe and out of harm's way and guide them. So we were just curious if you've seen that role at all, or if that's something that we should be raising more awareness about.
Oh no, definitely raising more awareness, because as I've said, I've 52, had dogs all my life, completely familiar with therapy dogs and other canine companions or service dogs. I've got a high school friend who's got the dog that sniffs out the blood sugar issues.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. And just what her dog does for her just blows my mind. And reading the article that you guys sent me, I was like, okay, well, physical things, I can understand how a dog can help with that. But when you can't remember that you fed the dog 3 times, because my mom also had dogs most of her life. And up until August 2018, she had her poodle in the memory residence with her, which in the beginning was a benefit for my mom because she did not think she belonged there. She begged my sister and I not to leave her there. Why couldn't she live with one of us? My sister's 4.5 years younger and has school-aged children, so there's a big reason she couldn't live with my sister. And my husband and I are self-employed, so there's just and she needed a lot more help than either of us are physically or mentally capable of doing. I knew if she lived with me, it'd be a week and one of us would be dead. I have one child. There's a reason for that. It's like we got through the terrible 2s and the clingy 4s, and it was like, you know what, this is okay. We'll just keep moving forward. We don't need to repeat any of this stuff. So
I think we can all
she's
relate
a great
to that.
kid. So
Absolutely.
so I had not heard of canine caregivers, and I was really super fascinated reading the article. So why don't you tell me, let's back up just a little bit, because I'm sure people are aware of therapy dogs. They go into hospitals or nursing homes and they kind of just provide comfort. My neighbor is actually, she owns a dog named Bella, and that's what Bella does. Bella's a therapy dog. Bella is amazing. Bella has trained my middle dog on how to behave properly around small dogs. It's fascinating. My youngest dog is a runner, so we don't get to socialize with the other dogs as much because we live in a golf course neighborhood and the dogs would go out and run on the green and play with each other while my youngest runs on the green, chases the rabbits, and doesn't come back till he's exhausted. So we can't do that. So what traits does a dog need to have before they can be considered for training to be a canine caregiver? That's a tricky word to say.
Oh, we just talked about this one, Ben.
Yes, go for it.
Oh, no. This is all you.
Well, so let's start with, I'm going to start with a couple things that dogs can definitely be used for. And so I'm going to start with the search and rescue one, tracking one first.
Okay.
That one is something that already exists in the communities right now and can be used. It drives me bonkers because I'm on a search and rescue team, and our search and rescue team does tracking, trailing, and cadaver search. Finding
Bodies.
Dead bodies. Yes, I want to be sensitive in that, and I was trying to think of a good word to say that, but there's not really a good word to say that. They find the dead very well. But the two that really I think need more. First off, more awareness are the search and rescue teams, because it happens to me all the time. I'll be sitting around and I'll get an alert from, I don't know if you guys have these. We have apps for our communities called the one we have is called Nextdoor that tells us, what's going on in the neighborhood. We get alert probably once a month. Hey, so-and-so is missing. A kid's missing. An Alzheimer's patient wandered off. And my son-in-law almost invariably calls me up and says, Ben, why don't you go search for that person? And I'm like, hey, I'm a deputy search and rescue person, and I cannot just go out and self-deploy. I just can't go out and look for those people. And it drives me crazy that our local law enforcement don't use us in the capacity. We have tracking and trailing dogs that could very easily go find Alzheimer's patients who wander off. And I know there's GPS things that they have and all other kind of stuff, but dogs can definitely help in that capacity very easily. And I don't know why we don't use those more often for that.
Would you say that it's a lack of knowledge, that they just don't know enough
a lot
about
of times it
capabilities?
is. Yeah, a lot of times it is, but it's also a little bit of sometimes it's just political, right? Sometimes these law enforcement people get a little bit, and I think it's really important for your viewers, Jennifer, to go, hey, look, you know what? Why don't you call in the search and rescue? There's a lot of places that do a really good job with that, but there's also places that don't use them at all. And I know that, like, for instance, in our community, we have probably 4 search and rescue dogs that could find Alzheimer's patients very quickly. And even in urban environments, a lot of times we think of search and rescue, we think in the middle of the mountains somewhere, but in an urban environment, there's a lot of dogs that are very good at trailing, can track down people who are missing of any flavor in any environment. They smell very well. So I think it's really important. I would think it'd be really important if, you have someone who is missing or, has a tendency to wander off, know what the resources in your community are in relation to that. And then, ask those law enforcement to utilize those resources. They exist. They're there. They would love to help. That's what they're there for. I would love to get a call to go help. And I don't need news coverage. I don't need anything. I don't know. I talk about Siggy all the time. Siggy loves to work, and it would just be one big game for her, and she would love to go help.
Well, and it's important when, even like right now, because we're having rain here. I'm in Northern California. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's not cold. We did have a couple weeks where it was cold, not compared to you. You're in Ohio, right? Yeah.
I'm in North Dakota. And
North Dakota,
Minnesota.
even worse.
Yeah, I'm in North Carolina.
Okay.
But
well,
either place, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, we don't generally get snow in where I live. I back up to a mountain that's tops out at about 3,800 feet, and it had snow on it for the better part of a week, which is extremely rare. We'll get snow. Usually it melts off by lunchtime as the daytime temperature warms up. This was like in the 30s and 40s for over a week, which is a no-brainer for me. I don't do that.
Yeah.
But even in mild cold temperatures like we're having now, if you get wet from the rain and you're damp and the temperature drops, you could have hypothermia rapidly, and the dog is going to be able to find you a whole lot faster than humans. But I have
Absolutely.
good news for you. My husband has a client who trains police dogs. So
Yes.
I'm going to make sure he knows that this is something they need to start focusing on, because, like I said, in California, 1 in 3 people die from Alzheimer's. That's a large part of the population.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
And we live.
It's really simple, and the training isn't that. I mean, the training is extensive, but there's lots of people who do it all the time. So.
I believe it. And I know, just for listeners who may or may not be super familiar with dogs, if you're familiar with a bloodhound and they got those long droopy ears, those droopy ears, when they're sniffing the ground, sweep up the scents up into their nose. And that's one of the reasons that bloodhounds are great trackers.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Like I said, I've had dogs all my life, and I knew bloodhounds weren't real smart. I grew up with poodles and golden retrievers, and
Yes.
we're on our 4th, 5th, and 6th golden retriever. Number 6, who's almost 2, is wicked smart. They all keep getting smarter. So
Yes.
dog number 7 is going to be telling me what to do.
Well, I have a dog
problem.
that tells me what to do all the time, and we have 2 Goldens on our team, on our search and rescue teams. And the thing about Goldens, like Siggy, as a German Shepherd, who's my dog, doesn't like other people, right? I mean, she'll tolerate you, but you're background to her. But Goldens just love to interact with people, and that's what they're bred to do. And so they make also really good live find, tracking and trailing dogs. So the different here, I'll go a little bit deep on you, Jennifer. So the bloodhound is a tracker, nose to the ground, looking at your footprints, sniffing your footprints. A lot of Goldens are what we call trailers. They get their head up and they don't. Their nose is not necessarily on the ground. It's generally in the air, looking for air rafts going through. And so Goldens make excellent trailing dogs. So German Shepherds can do either. Commonly, you'll see them do both. The thing about bloodhounds are, and I'm going to offend all my bloodhound people, but they are dumber than a post. Like, they're like, that we all love bloodhounds. We all love watching the old westerns where the bloodhound is tracking, and that's what they're designed to do, and they're great at it. And we have a bloodhound on our team, and I love it when they just start wailing and howling like they're on a trail and they get all excited. It's a lot of fun. But anyway, then the trailing dogs are the ones that really can just cut down and find the people really fast. So a tracking dog is really, really important for establishing you probably direction of travel and all those kind of things. So anyway, those are really important components.
One thing somebody told me recently that I thought was interesting, and I wish I could have somewhat experimented with this with my mom. But if a person with memory loss goes missing, they generally walk in the direction of their dominant hand. So if they leave their front door, they will probably go to the right. Now, the reason
Interesting.
and it makes sense really, but where my parents lived, to the left and across the street, just a smidgen, is an elementary school. To the right it's like a little opening where the street was supposed to go through, and then there's more houses down the street. So I would think it would have been 50-50 with my mom. She might have gone right because that's the direction the dog would generally go, over to the open space where people walk their dogs. There's lots of scents, but then there's the school with all the kids that she loves to watch. So it was interesting, and it'd be something to kind of see, like if you just walk out front with your loved one, which direction do they generally kind of lean towards, was interesting. But
that information is really helpful when you're talking about dogs, because they will actually, they can tell that. You think they do struggle on hard surfaces like concrete and asphalt, but they have a pretty good sense. They can do a pretty good job there. So yes.
I believe it.
Knowing all those things would be very valuable for care.
Well, this is why I talk to so many different people about so many different things, because the more we know, the better we can care for our loved ones and our community, and just, hopefully make this disease a little less traumatic, because it's already bad enough as it is. We don't need loved ones or neighbors wandering off. I have a neighbor with Parkinson's, and I worry about him regularly. I try not to, but he's wildly taller than his wife. Mm-hmm. And he's made comments he doesn't want to become a burden. And it's like, how do I basically tell him that, at some point she is not going to be able to take care of you without sounding terrible.
Right. And my mom actually has Parkinson's, so I can relate to that too. And Ben, I think you can talk a little bit about the relationship between Parkinson's and dementia. There's a very strong genetic relationship there.
There very much, isn't it? And I could give an entire lecture in biochemistry about, and it's another protein misfolding disease. It's very similar, tau also. Okay, I'm gonna give like 30 seconds and then I'll be done. I promise.
Okay.
But tau is associated with microtubules, and Parkinson's can also be, and it's a protein misfolding disease. And Parkinson's also has a component where the proteins aggregate and cause damage and inflammation. So it's just, they're in the same family of diseases. Let's just put it that way. And there's a genetic component to that. So Parkinson's is very heritable because these protein misfolding diseases obviously translate genetically. So they're very, very related, both of them. So.
Well, I hope Alzheimer's is not as inheritable.
Right. And there is a small component, but it's not anywhere near as heritable as Parkinson's. Parkinson's, you can pretty much, there's a lot of components to Parkinson's that are very heritable.
Well, that's good news for me. No Parkinson's, but the memory loss is pretty strong.
Yes.
I just hope I take after my dad's side of the family. I do in a lot of respects, in physical respects. I did inherit the fat gene from my dad's side of the family. I used to weigh over 200 pounds. So for those people who are going to see this on YouTube eventually, once I get that all set up, I don't weigh over 200 pounds anymore. And that's one of the things I started doing to lose the weight. I had to just continuously find the path that led me to the path that worked.
Yes.
And it was because I had a client who said, oh my gosh, you have a family history of diabetes and you're overweight, you're screwed. And little genetic, part of me is like, no, I'm not screwed. I will show you. And so I have kept most of it off. Turning 50 didn't help. All that change of life stuff is not helping. So I'm struggling to lose some of that weight again. But that's one of the important things for Alzheimer's is eat properly, sleep properly, exercise regularly, challenge your brain, which I do with this podcast. I've learned way more stuff than I thought I needed to know. And I learned stuff like from talking to you that I would never learn if I don't talk to people. So
Absolutely.
that's,
I feel the same way.
Well, and
you
I've
know.
changed my lifestyle completely too, based on, well, I hit 40. So, and I got this nice letter from my dad saying, "Hey, you better get your act together." And I was like, "Oh, I guess I better."
Yeah.
So.
Well, I have a grandmother who will be, my dad's mom will be 101 March 28th. So in a month. So, and she's
Wow.
mentally fine. She's blind, mostly blind from glaucoma.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope, since I got the fat gene on dad's side of the family, I'm hoping I take after her. I do with the ornery part. So that's what I meant by that little genetic component. It's like, oh yeah, ornery is definitely a family trait. So
yes, I can relate to that as well. So.
Anyway,
okay. So
back on the dogs.
Yes, well, this is all good stuff. So the other things that dogs can do, and there are Alzheimer's dogs. They're not as prevalent as some of the other service dogs. Like you mentioned with the diabetic detection dogs. Diabetes is also a really, really common disease, and that's also increasing based on some of our diet and other things that are really, really bad for us. But so some of the things that we can train dogs to do with that Alzheimer's, and I suspect it's probably more early than late onset. So dogs are really good at behavior interruption, which you're going to have to explain if that's. I haven't had the misfortune of having to train or deal with caregiving of Alzheimer's patients yet.
Cross your fingers.
Yes, exactly. But behavior interruption is something we can train very easily into dogs. And so if there's something that, and I know this is very common, and I've seen a lot of videos from students in this, where they have the Alzheimer's patient will get into routines that are really not good for them. And you can train the dog to interrupt and disrupt repetitive or behaviors that would be dangerous that you can kind of anticipate, which a golden would be a perfect dog for this type of, just interrupting, so, and helping out.
I laugh because, well, my dogs have me trained. The girl dog, who's 4.5, she's laying in the hallway. I'm coming down, from one part of the house to the other. She just rolls over, flips the back leg open, and looks at me like, "You will scratch me. Do not walk by without paying toll." And she knows it works. She is so smart. She knows when I'm making dinner that if she sits up real tall and she smiles and her eyes sparkle, I don't know how she manages that one, and she can see both of my eyes, she knows I can see her, and she knows that I know she's begging, and it almost
that's part of it.
Works. Yeah,
that's part of it, because obviously they can pull the patient out of behaviors. They can also put people into routines, and they can relax them and calm them, which I suspect are all really, really important when we're talking about dealing with, and because we see this all the time with other diseases as well when they do that. So,
well, there's something soothing just for everybody about petting the dog. It's soothing. It brings your blood pressure down.
Yep. And there's some of the patients get to be combative. I've seen that Alzheimer's patients combative, and dogs can absolutely help calm and break the cycle of that process, that escalation process.
Yeah, I learned recently one trigger for being combative. Mm-hmm. And if you think about, and this is a reason I'm bringing this up, is I don't think I've ever talked about this on the podcast before, but if your processor is not working right, and somebody helps, they come in your room first thing in the morning and they say, "Hi, Ben, how are you doing? Did you sleep well?" And they're just all chipper, and they're in your face asking questions, and you're trying to function how we are first thing in the morning before we've had our caffeine. Well, if your brain is even worse than that, and somebody's just in your face and your brain is not processing what they're saying, the gal, she's called the dementia whisperer. She kind of explained it as if somebody was speaking in a foreign language or gibberish, but you could understand it was a question. It was like, blah, 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 blah. You'd be like, "Get away from me." And so they have a tendency to shove people or yell or run away, and it's amazing how somebody with Alzheimer's can totally pick up on your emotions. You didn't have to say a word. Like, I do not visit my mom if I am tired or stressed. I missed the Monday after her birthday, and I felt really guilty. Her birthday was on a Saturday, and I go Mondays. But I had a cold, and I was tired, and I was just like, I could probably deal with mom, maybe. But when you throw in her friend, who is almost a constant companion, I'm like, there's no way I can deal with both these ladies. So we're just going to have to skip it today. And I always say I'm going to go later in the week, and that never happens. Monday is this, I'm very organized and scheduled. So it's like, if I don't go Mondays, it'll be the next Monday and catch up. But I think that's one reason that dogs can be so good with them, because they are also very attuned to the person's emotions. Like my youngest Golden, if you cry, he will crawl up in your lap, and he's a small Golden, so he weighs about 60 pounds. So 60 pounds in your lap's a little much, but he will crawl in your lap and lick your face and wag his tail, and he'll do everything he can to end the crying, which of course he's male, so there's probably that too.
And that's what they're good at, right? That's what they're good at.
Well, Golden Retrievers, they don't know anybody that's not the next best friend or food dispenser.
That's true.
So how can these canine caregivers, like I said, that's tricky to say. I read in the article that they can help get owners home. They can remain with the owner and bark for help if the owner refuses to go home.
Absolutely. These are all skills that that existing service dogs are very easily trained to do. Their dogs are very easily trained to keep you on track, and they can be used to, if you're going the wrong way, they can lead you the right way. They can bark. They can find help. They can help you cross the street. They can keep you safe until, and you can put a GPS tracker on your dog. You can use the dog as a tether so that, the dog will follow. Let's say you're taking your mom out, and you can have the dog on a leash with your mom, and the dog will just follow you as a tether. And so you can have it, or you can just have a second leash attached, and then you're not worried about, your mom can have a little bit of freedom and a little bit of enjoyment, and not feel like, hey, they're micromanaging where I am. And you can have a little bit of freedom to know that you're not, going to lose your mom in the middle of, Target or something, or, wherever you're doing something. So, or a festival, or, something like that. So they're really good at those type of things as well. And, the other thing that they're really good at, and Michelle probably could talk to this, is they're just really good companions, because a lot of times I suspect that Alzheimer's patients are very isolated, and they feel isolated, and that can be their my grandfather got a little bit too crazy of a dog, but he got a puppy, which, and he suffers from diabetes, and he's very isolated especially after my grandmother passed away, and that dog is just his best friend. And I think that's a really, really important component of the process as well. So
it is, and it helps them if they are still independent enough to go out and walk and meet the neighbors. It also helps keep them social that way, gives them something social to do, which is good. Unfortunately for my mom's dog, my dad was never good at walking her, and my mom was very good at remembering that the dog needed to eat. She never remembered that the dog had eaten. So the poor dog should have weighed about 15 pounds and was rapidly approaching 30. So, yeah. She was a black miniature poodle, and she was like a tank.
This is why I like German Shepherds. My German Shepherds, I can just free feed, and they don't have to worry. They won't overeat. So you could just have, we just have unlimited food, unlimited water, and they just eat whenever they need to.
I had my first two Goldens were like that, but let's see, first two, so 3, 4, 5, and 6. They go in there, they suck up the food like a high-powered vacuum, come in the kitchen, burp at you, and stare at you like, yo, where's dinner? It's pretty funny. There was a time, this shows you how smart these dogs are. My husband and I went out to dinner. Daughter was studying. She said, can you bring me back some to go? Okay, great. So when we got home, the dog looked at me, looked at where the dog food is, looked at me, looked where, okay, hello, I'm hungry. And I thought, oh, well, she normally feeds them. When she eats, she hasn't eaten, so she hasn't fed the dog. So I didn't bother asking, fed the dogs. She heard the kibble hit the bowls, and the food was gone before she could holler, I already fed the dogs. And there was one day they almost got 3 dinners because they conned 2 of us, and they were working on the third person.
First
And the
thing.
third, yeah, and it was like, and they were Oscar award winning, acting, because they acted like they had not been fed.
Of course.
That's
And-
my dog. I call him a hobbit. He
Okay.
wants second breakfast and second dinners, and oh yeah.
Well, the funniest thing is my oldest is 11, the oldest dog, and he loves pancakes. We have pancakes and scrambled
Ooh.
eggs on Mondays before we go to spin. When we come home, we unlock the door. Now he has some nerve degeneration in his back legs, so he's not speedy, and he's a little bit heavier than he needs to be because walking for the last 4 months has been not something that's easily doable. It's not enjoyable in the rain and all the smoke we had in November. So
Oh yeah.
we're a little off our walking game right now. That'll change in the next 2-3 weeks probably. But we're like literally 1 foot in the door, not measurement wise, but like 1 foot is in the doorway, and he's down the hall to the kitchen, and he's looking at the counter, and he looks at you, and he looks at the counter, and he's like, yo, give me the pancake. Give me the pancake.
I'm ready.
And he knows. And if we go in the same type of clothes to the gym and we come home, it doesn't have to, it confuses him. And he's like, wait, they're wearing spin clothes. There must be pancakes. It's just, the correlation is hysterical.
Yes, they're very good at classical conditioning. You can,
That is true.
and they're very good at training you.
Oh,
for
yes.
classical conditioning. So they definitely understand that, and they definitely can take advantage of that whole scenario. So the other thing I was curious about, what your thoughts on would be, there's an entirely emerging field, and I say emerging, it's getting quite popular, but therapy dogs in institutionals. We talked with Lorette the other day on a podcast where she's training more and more institutional dogs to just help. And I was curious if you've seen that, or if you think that would be a very valuable resource for some of these large facilities.
I have not. My mom is in a large residence. There's the assisted living, which I don't know how many apartments that is. And then the memory care is about 32 residents if they're fully occupied, which currently they're not. They renovated over the summer, and I don't know if that triggered some stuff, but it's been quite a few people who have died, which isn't, not uncommon.
Sure.
And people that have moved out for families run out of money. I know one gal that my mom was really close to was getting very, very bossy and very, very obnoxious and somewhat paranoid. She was becoming less enjoyable to spend time with unless I took both of them out, and then it wasn't too bad. She moved out at the beginning of November, and I was a little concerned when I found out that was happening because she was really close with my mom, but my mom's close to another gal now, so it's okay.
Yes.
But I think it could help because there's one gal where my mom lives whose go-to phrase is help me, somebody help me. And there are times I've now gotten accustomed to it. I make sure if I'm there and I've heard her say that multiple times and she's in her room, I make sure the care staff is aware, and they'll be like, oh yeah, we just checked on her 10 minutes ago. Okay, just double checking.
Right.
It's a little unnerving when somebody, and it's a monotone. She's not yelling. It's just like a continuous monotone, help me. And it's after you've heard that for about 5 minutes, you want to help her any way you can.
Absolutely.
I would think a dog could help soothe her, whatever is triggering the I need attention, therefore I need help. There's something going on in her mind that's triggering the help me, I need help.
So this is one of the reasons we're really excited about talking about this topic, because these are not cheap dogs, right? They're expensive, and I don't think anyone is, but they could be an important tool for those kind of scenarios. If you could put in an institutional dog to help that, you could just leave the dog with the person for a little bit and help, soothe that patient. You can imagine a golden retriever or a lab or some of these other, even some like a Papillon or some of these other small dogs, lap dogs, would be very, very helpful in just breaking those cycles of, that some of the patients get into. So
the only thing that I would see as a challenge besides the cost, and I used to photograph a local police department's canines, so I'm aware of the cost.
Yes,
Had,
this is going to cost about, sometimes it's $20,000 to upwards of $60,000 to train some of these dogs. So it's not cheap.
I know when they bought them, and we're talking probably a dozen years ago when I was working with them, they were like 10 grand. So that doesn't surprise me, although 60 makes me want to faint just a little bit.
It does.
I see two things. My mom had her dog, and there was another resident in the memory care who had his two little dogs. He's actually moved over to the assisted living side, which is interesting. I don't know how you graduate to that, but it's definitely better for him. His mind is not great, but he was still really independent. But I noticed with those three dogs, Mom and Xavier's dogs, a lot of the other residents who weren't dog people, maybe didn't have dogs of their own growing up or as, adults, sometimes were a little standoffish. They didn't want the dog come near them. Don't want the dog lick me. They seem to have a little bit of fear. So
I can see that.
Yeah, so that would be one thing. I'm not sure how you
We don't use German Shepherds to start off.
That's for sure. Or a Belgian Malinois.
Yeah, you get a Malinois in there, and it would be a terrorist organization, terrorist type situation.
Yeah, no, you'd have to have a fluffy golden retriever with their happy faces.
Yes.
So I see that as being a little bit of a challenge, and with people who are memory impaired, I don't know how you would fix that. Fix not necessarily being the best word, but on the flip side of the coin, I see a dog being very beneficial to the care staff, because when you've listened to somebody yelling, help me, help me, help me, help me for half an hour.
Yes.
There is not enough training to make it so that your nerves don't just want to go in there and help her.
Absolutely.
And it gets to the point where they don't ignore it. They kind of like tune out 75% of it. So they're still tuned into her if something changes.
But that's what if you had an institutional, you wouldn't necessarily have to have that patient wouldn't necessarily have to have a dog themselves, but you could have an institutional dog, bring the dog in. And that's where those repetitive behaviors, right? That help me would be a repetitive behavior. And you could take that dog and help teach that dog to break that repetitive behavior as an institutional dog. And you wouldn't necessarily. Be great. Yeah, wouldn't it? You could just bring that dog in there. That dog, simple things like licking faces, or the person reaches down to pet, are going to, get that person out of that, spiraling cycle of whatever behavior is. They, and you can train a service dog to shut off lights and pick up remotes and all those kind of things too, that normal service dogs do. But as so everybody wouldn't have to have an Alzheimer's service dog. If you did an institution-wide one, that would be an amazing resource for facilities.
I can totally see that, because the way my mom's residence is shaped, it's basically a square, and in the middle is a beautiful courtyard. Now, the challenge with my mom, with any of the dogs, is there wasn't a dog door. So somebody had to let my mom's dog out. And because of the fact that my dad insisted on getting a puppy when they shouldn't have, I begged him to go to Poodle Rescue.
It is a challenge. People love puppies. Puppies are fine, and then they grow into their teenage years, and no one likes. I always say this to everyone: no one likes a teenage dog. No one. You have to be crazy to like it. Like from the point that they're probably 6 months to 18 months to 2 years, they're an awkward teenager, and that's just, there's no two ways about that. So
true. My youngest we got at 7 months, and he's a rescue. He was living outside with his brothers, So he loves very much the comforts of home and the nice food and the bed and all that stuff. Open the back door to the 400 plus acres of open space, and it takes him literally 4 seconds or less to go from inside the house to over the back fence.
Right.
And he chases the bunnies and the birds, and he just runs and he runs and he runs. And I don't know that he will ever get over being wild. He's got that wild streak. And then, like, I was getting out of the shower after the gym this morning, and he's taking a nap on his doggy bed. I'm like, I don't understand you. You're like a little schizophrenic.
Yes.
But he's totally a love. Oh my God, he's. Whew.
I mean, you can train that out of dogs. It's possible. I just have German Shepherds who don't ever want to leave me. It's just that they're genetically they're not going to. Like Siggy's not going to go more than 20 feet from me, or she's going to come back and check with me, make sure I'm okay.
Oh well, my oldest one is 3 feet. He is a total mama's dog, and
Absolutely.
so the other day I was working on my computer, and he's literally laying under the office chair with his head on the leg. Just not at all comfortable, I would think. Doesn't look comfortable. And, after a while, I'm like, I think it's very insulting that I am working here and there is serious snoring going on under my chair. I'd like to take a nap or do something other than work.
Yes.
And so I leaned over because I have my iPhone next to me at my computer so I can listen to podcasts if I'm not listening to and editing my own. And I just leaned over. It wasn't easy. And I snapped a picture kind of blind of him. And I got a little video too. I'm like, seriously, dog? Like, you got to be snoring under the chair.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, I see that if you had a care residence where my mom lives, if you had somebody in the assisted living that could come over and maybe bring the dog during the day, although I can see a lot of times they'd need him at night. I don't know how do you think a dog would function okay if they lived in the memory care 24/7?
Yeah.
Okay.
So dogs don't have to. Here's the cool part. Dogs don't. We have a kind of a thing to think that, or a tendency to anthropomorphize on dogs, meaning we say if I like it, then the dog is going to like it. Just like you were anthropomorphizing about your dog not working.
Yes.
I do that all the time. We do that all the time. I do that all the time. Everyone does that all the time. Here's the thing about dogs. Dogs can be in a crate a long time, and it will not affect them at all. So at night, you can lock the dog up in a crate, and they're actually really that's their home. That's their comfort zone. They're perfectly comfortable and happy being there. They get tons of stimulation during the day, and you can lock them up at night. And some people are like, oh, that's cruel. But the dog does not mind it at all. In fact, like my dog, Odin, we give him the option where to sleep. He chooses to sleep in his crate every single night. He can sleep on our bed with us. He would rather not. whatever floats your boat. So there are plenty of dogs who would be perfectly comfortable just going. And he's a dog. He's a total social butterfly. He loves us. He loves actually snuggling with us. But at night, he likes to have his space. He likes to be in his crate. He likes, to be able to move around. It's soothing for them. So, and, you can get into a lot of psychology. Temple Grandin does a really good discussion of this when she talks about cows and some of the other things, some of these behaviors, and that dogs have. Dogs are fine in a crate. So you could, the night staff, if they felt like they needed, they could bring them out. But if they didn't, if they need a break, dogs can just go. The institutional dog could just go in their crate and be fine. For hours on end. You don't have to entertain the dogs. That's the cool part. So,
because I was reading in your article that they can also help with sundowners, but I don't remember it specifically saying how they did that. Are you familiar with sundowners?
I don't recall. I don't know. I'm not familiar. You want to describe it to me?
It usually happens towards the end of the day, generally around sundown. Now, if you think about sunset time, so like right when the world is in between daytime and nighttime, it's kind of flat. There's not a lot of contrast. That probably makes more sense to Michelle, being a photographer.
Yep, that twilight hour, yes.
Yeah, they seem to get more confused.
Okay.
And sometimes the confusion can be pretty wild.
Sure.
I've only experienced it a little bit with my mom. We were driving from my hometown to hers. I took the back route, which is windy, twisty roads around the hills and very few street lights. It's all country kind of road. And man, the questions she started asking me were really crazy. Just like out of the blue. And it was when my dad was in the hospital before he came home on hospice. So I was stressed and I didn't need all these wackadoodle questions.
Sure.
Well, I mean, if you think about that time of day and the lighting, it can be very confusing to clear-minded people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it's harder to see, it's harder to differentiate between a dog and a dark dog in a road, for
Exactly.
instance. You know, it's so I can definitely understand how that can be very, very confusing and very
So
disorienting.
I can tell you exactly how dogs can help with this. So I don't know if your dogs do this, Jennifer or Michelle, but Siggy knows my routine down to the second.
Yes, I know that
Yes.
way too.
Yes.
So it wouldn't matter what was going on. I turn around in the morning after I've had my breakfast. I turn around and Siggy's not anywhere around, and I go and I can find her in the bathroom. She's waiting for me to take a shower. I have a routine. She knows exactly what's next. You can train a dog to follow a routine and help mitigate all kinds of confusion. And they can also, take if the patient is exhibiting any kind of confusion behavior, you could train them to take them to the hospital staff, or you could train them to do, or to the administrative staff or whatever. There's tons of things like that dogs can triggers and routines and all those things. Dogs could absolutely be helpful in mitigating and solving those kind of problems. So
It's interesting. Many of the residents where my mom lives are not, they're not super social. Most of them are fairly, well, no, a few of them are in wheelchairs. My mom's next door neighbor, she walks. I don't want to say she's a wanderer because she can't wander off, but she walks, every inch of the residence, but she doesn't really speak. She mumbles, and she's Irish, so what she mumbles sometimes is not English. If you listen carefully and cross your fingers really hard, sometimes she'll pop out an English word, and sometimes you can grab it and maybe respond to her in some sort of reasonable way, because she knows exactly what she's saying or asking you, and you look at her and you're like, I have no clue what you're saying. It's frustrating to her. And I would think that, I don't know if she's a dog person because I can't ask. I can't remember her interacting with my mom's dog, but I could see throwing the ball for the dog or just interacting with the dog would at least give her something else to do besides roam around. I mean, they just renovated this past summer, and I swear that woman's going to wear out the carpet again. It's just like she just goes around and around and around.
Dogs are very good at also just reading your emotions. And so you can imagine you're communicating with them in a foreign language, and your body language means a lot. And her body language, the dogs can be very easily trained to interact and interface when she's having those kind of situations. So I honestly think that would be a very, very valuable tool in the tool belt of, in those kind of environments, not in a huge institutional environment, as well as just maybe not in late stage Alzheimer's where, you're going to forget to feed the dog. That would be I think that would be a situation where you'd have to step in.
Well, that was the problem with Holly was the previous dog. Misty was my mom's dog. And the reason that she was almost double her body weight is because the residents fed her from the table. The dog didn't eat dog food.
Sure.
Because we had put in place, mom had been there about 6 months, close to 6 months. And the executive director and the med techs and myself, we put together a plan to feed the dog properly.
Yeah.
And it was the dogs would remain in the room during mealtime. The med techs would feed her twice a day because that's what dogs need, and they knew how much to feed her. Yeah, that took all of half of a meal, if that long, before the dog realized she was getting left out and she shrieked and howled and carried on. You would have thought somebody had
Sure.
released the hellhound.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, she was terrible. And being small, she like shriek, bark, and howl. It was horrible. I mean, they would make a great Halloween soundtrack. So of
Absolutely.
course, all these, very sweet old ladies would feel terrible for this dog who's being horribly mistreated, and they'd let her out, and then
Sure.
they'd feed her. I mean, they would actually, like, one lady cut up half of the meat from from her meal and wrapped it in the napkin, which happens to be cloth, so don't really want you running off with those, and was going to feed it to the dog. And the care staff, the gals, they knew the routine, and they're like, "Oh, no, no, honey, it's okay. Misty had her food. She had lunch." And it started to get into an argument. And
Uh-huh.
obviously the line between being insistent and bordering on potential elder abuse is a very, very thin line. So
Absolutely.
caregivers, they always err, if they're good, they will err on the side of caution and not don't start a fight with somebody who has no memory. It's not a good
Absolutely.
idea. So the
Absolutely.
dog won all the time. But I noticed before we rehomed her that because she did not have structure and discipline, she was getting a little nutty.
Absolutely. Dogs really require that. That is a significant problem with Alzheimer's and some of the elderly. I don't know what we're going to do with my grandfather's dog when he's in the late stage diabetic, problems. Rehoming these dogs is a really big problem. And I think, it's not realistic for like you to take an additional dog sometimes into your home. Right.
Well, no, and my dogs don't like her.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't understand this. I mean, I don't have. I understand being very loyal to your dogs, but I also don't. I also have a really hard time with people who are like, "Well, I'd be insistent on taking the dog into my house." Well, that's not always a great idea. I mean, it'd be like sometimes it's bringing constant conflict and strife into your house. Your dogs aren't going to like it. That dog's not going to like it. You're not going to like it. Why not find another good home for that dog?
That's not good for anybody.
It's not good for anybody. And I know there's people out there who are very insistent and very loyal, and I'm a very loyal person, but at the same time, you kind of, in these situations, find the best home for the dog that you can. You don't have to suffer through those problems. You don't have to feel guilty about finding a good home for the dog. You don't. I just don't buy into that mentality. I don't know why we have to have that mentality sometimes.
Well, it's nice that we do, but sometimes you have to be realistic. And
Yes.
I knew, I mean, my parents hadn't gone out of town in a long time because it was just too traumatic for my mom. Change. It's like you change the dog's routine. Don't change the routine of somebody who's got memory issues, because they just get all confused, and then they start to get a little hostile, or it's stressful and it's not fun.
Yes.
And it's the same with the dogs. Well, my dad got the dog from a breeder. So I called the breeder and said, "You need to take her back."
Yes, a good breeder will always do that.
Yeah, I had to get a little insistent because she was a little flaky on it. And I knew we had a deadline. It's like when they come to put the new carpet in, dog's got to be gone.
Yeah.
So I had to get a little bit snarky, because I basically said, either you come get the dog or let me know where to drop her off, or I'm taking her to the pound, which was not going to do that. I'd already contacted Poodle Rescue.
Yes.
And she was 10. So, and she's never had a lot of structure and discipline.
Yeah.
And she was super overweight, and just finding her a home would have been challenging. I do believe that she went to the breeder's grandkids farm in Oregon. So yes. I hope she's living out the remainder of her senior years much happier and healthier.
Well, a responsible breeder would do that without any questions. I would do that in a second. It wouldn't even be a question for me. We'd find a place and make it work. And commonly we do rehome dogs, but that's just the nature of the beast. So.
But it's also something that people need to consider. Like, okay, my dad got her in 2009, and well, I guess the beginning of 2010. She was born in 2009, I think, 2008. I got my dog in 2000. He's 11, so she must have been born in 2009. And I said, I just got out of the puppy stage with mine, the one that's the oldest of the three now. I'm like, it's exhausting, and I don't
It is
have
exhausting.
diabetes, and I'm however many 25 years younger than my dad was. And I just said, I don't really think it's a good idea. Why don't we go to Poodle Rescue? And he's like, it's all the way down Visalia. I'm like, that's like 3-hour drive, 4-hour drive. You have a hybrid. Let's go. I'll go with you. I'll
Yes.
drive your car. It's not a big deal. We'll go. It'll be fun. Let's go, Dad. Absolutely not. And then I fainted because anybody that's bought a purebred dog knows they are not cheap. Much
Nope.
cheaper than what you were talking about a few minutes ago. But like, just going by size, I got a way better deal on my dog.
I understand.
And, he trained her pretty good, but, she had a doggy door, so they didn't have to worry about that. But I never did understand why he couldn't get my mom not to feed her multiple times a day. It's like, all you have to do is say, oh, it's okay, you just fed her. And then just move the food. Just
Absolutely.
like, take it gently. But I guess living with somebody 24/7 that you have to constantly change what they're doing so that you don't overfeed the dog or whatever. I did an episode on pets with seniors because it's something that needs to be considered. Like you said, your grandfather probably shouldn't have gotten a puppy.
Yes.
And there's lots of older dogs that need rescuing. Ours was 7 months old when we rescued him, so he didn't fit into that category.
There's tons of older dogs that are great companions. We have friends who just rescued a 5-year-old dog, and they, it's a great opportunity for both. There's plenty of good homes, plenty of good opportunities for dogs too. So,
well, this conversation has made me really want to get a caregiving canine and have it at mom's home, like be in charge of that, which is probably insane. I have enough things to be in charge of, but I'm fascinated by what they can do.
Well, I think the important part for us is just to raise awareness that this is something that it's another avenue for dogs to impact our lives in a very positive way. And hopefully we can start to raise awareness that this is something that they can improve our lives, and we can improve the lives of the dogs as well. Because dogs like to have jobs as well as we do. They want to, there's dogs out there that want to engage with us and want to do these things. And so it is meaningful for them and it's meaningful for us. And I really appreciate you shedding some insight into, this opportunity for us to raise awareness. It certainly has been, I have never had to caregive for an Alzheimer's or dementia patient or family member. And so for me, it's been insightful to just discuss some of those topics. I can see totally how they impact you personally. So
yeah, just the repetitive behaviors, not remembering that she fed the dog. The dog was also smart because she would look at the top of the refrigerator, which is much harder when you're a miniature poodle. And she would look at the top of the refrigerator where the treats were. My mom would be like, oh, the dog needs a treat. Or the dog would want to interact with my mom, play a little bit, and my mom would automatically feed her. That was the go-to interaction. And I'm not really sure how you would train a dog to not take treats, because I don't know about you, but golden retrievers are mine. I think sometimes my girl dog only loves me because I'm the food dispenser.
Yep.
Hard to know. I hope she loves me for more than that. And I did read in the article that they can also bring somebody meds in a bite-proof package, which is interesting.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You can train your dog not to be. You can train your dog not to eat certain things. It's not. I mean, we do it all the time with German Shepherds, and Siggy. If I wanted Siggy to leave something, I can just tell her to leave it, and it's just a matter of training, right? You can train a dog to do anything you want.
That is true. I think the previous ones were trained a little better when I was younger and had more stamina.
Absolutely.
They started to get away with murder.
Yes, we've all been there. We've all been there.
Yeah.
But I see, because so many families are not blessed with, my parents' home was paid for. And in California, we had a proposition back in the late 70s that capped property taxes. And it's complicated and I have a hard time explaining it. But essentially, my parents' property taxes for the year are what mine are for the month.
Oh, wow.
Their property taxes are cheap.
Oh, that's
So,
great.
yeah, for her.
Yeah.
So we've rented out her home and her Social Security, plus my dad's investments. She should have enough money to stay in her residence until the end, which is good because I don't. Now she needs help showering. I don't want her. It's like I'll visit regularly. I don't want to
That's
get
hard.
into it.
That's hard.
It is, and it's a lot of people in the beginning stages, families, like children, my age children. They're like, but it's my mom. She was there when I, she diapered me. She was there when I was sick. But caregiving and raising children are not the same.
No.
I'm pretty passionate about passing that message on a lot, because when you have a kid, like I said with mine, you get through the terrible 2s and then you're on to the clingy 4s, and you get through these stages and there's an kind of an end date. They're going to graduate from high school. They're going to hit 18. If it's, your prerogative, they could be gone at 18. You're done.
Yeah.
Okay. My mom has had Alzheimer's for close to 20 years. And she's 76, so she could live easily another 15 years. That's 35 years. That's my entire adult life. That's like, no, thank you.
Yeah, and you're looking at a decline. You're not looking at there's no upside really.
Well, you can't just call up the neighborhood teenager to babysit.
Yeah.
You can't, like, I've talked to people who care for their loved ones in their home, and because of the memory loss, they're not, it's like, I need this now. Oh, I'm done with my lunch. Come get my plate. I need to go to the bathroom now. I need to, there's no patience. So if you're trying to work from home, like I do, and they need assistance, it's an immediate drop what you're doing and go take care of them. And that just gets more and more and more. So I can see how a dog could help if they helped interrupt the repetitive behaviors. If you could, in the earlier stages, send them out for a walk and not be in a heightened state of panic until they got back, that would be great. I can just see, I'm just like, I can't believe I've had dogs my whole life. I've been in this Alzheimer's journey forever. I can't believe I've never heard of a caregiving canine.
Well, there's so much that dogs can do for patients with dementia and Alzheimer's, and we'll post some of the great articles about this in our show notes. But like you said, delivering medicines, reminding them to eat, and yes, I believe you definitely can train a dog to not eat more than they're supposed to. I think I wouldn't think that an Alzheimer's and a dementia dog would. I wouldn't think you'd have a dog like that.
I would think that if they came trained with tasks, like,
sure,
this is what I'm supposed to do. Like I said, Misty was starting to get a little bit crazy. Like I try to take my mom out of the residence, partly because there are days when I just can't deal with her and the other people. It's hard enough dealing with her and her other friend. My mom has only befriended people named Diane, which is her name. It's super confusing. So this new Diane, closer to sundowner time, starts getting very lonely for her husband, who I'm assuming is gone, or she probably wouldn't be there. And she gets, like, we went out last week to the fabric store, and she started getting panicky that she was going to miss him. And it's like, I'm not leaving here until I finish this errand. And it took way too long to get the fabric cut. If I take them to the fabric store again, I'm getting the number for cutting fabric way before we decide what we're getting, because that was the holdup. And it was not relaxing at all, because she kind of wound up my mom about, missing dinner and missing where, well, my husband's going to show up. And then she goes off on this weird tangent. So I try to take my mom out, and I lost my train of thought because I was telling the story. I hate it when I do that.
I do that all the time. Michelle has to kind of reel me in. So.
Well, fortunately, just to calm any concerns, that is not a sign of Alzheimer's. Memory loss that affects daily life is a sign that you got to pay attention to, but rambling on and then forgetting your point is normal.
I think that's just getting older.
Yes.
It's because I was talking
I do the same
too much.
thing.
Well, I appreciate your time, Jennifer. We certainly, I'm excited to see if we can expand awareness of this topic and see if we can get more dogs into these scenarios. And so we're excited that you're sharing the message, and we're excited to share your message of helping caregivers with, just receiving daily care. So
Yeah.
we certainly appreciate it.
Well, I think people taking care of their family members in their home, I think a dog could be a huge help.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
And I think I'm going to talk to the executive director, Mom's Place, and tell them, hey, have you ever heard of this? And feel them out. Because I really like the idea. I can picture a golden retriever walking around their residence and helping some of the people that just need, like there was a gal the other day was looking for Sydney. There was no Sydney, and you could not tell her there was no Sydney. And just it's so hard to break that.
Well, even if you brought in therapy dogs a couple times a week, all those kind of things can help and facilitate.
Well, I took my oldest when I visited once, and he seemed very uncomfortable. So I'm going to take
not all dogs are designed to, I mean, it's kind of like if you take, different people in different environments. Sometimes dogs are not really comfortable. There are dogs that are very well trained and adapted for going into new environments and meeting new people, and they just love it, thrive on it.
Well, maybe to enhance the social awareness of this episode, I will take one of the other two, the younger two, and see how they interact with the residents and get some, whatever video footage, digital recording. I'm old, so it's still video in my world.
Look up Pet Partners. Pet Partners is a therapy dog organization, and see if they'll bring one of there's people who are trained and they have insurance and they have been certified, and they can come in and do that for you as well. So there's all kinds of good options that, maybe if you're...
Yeah, I'll talk to my neighbor, because like I said, she does that. They don't do that particular residence though. So I'll find out if there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And I'm just excited that we got to talk about this, because like I said, I didn't know they could do all this. Just silly.
Well, we're glad we could help. So.
Well, I will definitely spread the word, and Ben and I will have to get back and do another episode.
Absolutely. I will talk, Michelle will know this. I will talk about biochemistry anytime, any place.
Well, as long as you can, I hate to use the word dumb it down, but as long as you can simplify it for those of us.
And if you just ask me questions, I can do my best. So, and if not, you can just mute me for a certain part. You can just, so. Anyway.
Well, I will think about another topic that we can do, and I'll email you.
Perfect. So.
All righty. Well, you guys have a fantastic evening.
Thank you, Jennifer. Same to you.
Thanks so much.
Okay. We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.